So in short, just for a general audience, when we catch ourselves in compulsion, and for those who haven't done the Enneagram, I'll explain what this word compulsion means. And we notice it, apart from having a little bit of a sense of humor about it, what will we do about it? Now, of course, the first thing we have to do is observe it, and you've just indicated, or the questioner here has indicated, that's exactly what they did. And of course, the practice of observing it is elaborated for first-timers, but for second, third, fourth, fifth-timers, for those familiar with the process, you then have to replace the reaction that we call a compulsion. So let us see what is a compulsion for those who are not familiar with the term. We think of a compulsion as a very exaggerated behavior, and in fact it is. And so we don't see it as an exaggeration, we see it as normal behavior. So we have learned to interpret all our world around ourselves as a reality to the extent that things come from it, we have to react on the basis that we have to survive. We have to survive at all costs. But then you see there's a difference between survival and there's a difference between that and thriving. How do you thrive? How do you squeeze the orange juice from the orange of life? The phrase Swami Vivekananda used in a conversation with an atheist. Swami Vivekananda was accused of being something like, and I'm paraphrasing, pretty dull because you don't know how to enjoy life. Everything is so serious. On the contrary, says Swami Vivekananda, I enjoy life. I squeeze every drop of the orange of life from the orange. So how do we learn a technique of doing that so that life is not something that we renounce on the surface? That is, we don't say, all this world of matter we reject. Of course, there are some philosophies like that. Even you see the idea that to engage in material pursuits is something like a sin, and therefore has to be rejected and is frowned upon. All the pleasures of life have to be denied to us. But really, that's not the Vedanta teachings. I suppose there are some schools within that might say that. But when we take Neo-Vedanta as updated and experienced by, not only by, let us say, the 19th century mystic Sri Ramakrishna, but also others, we see that renunciation, and it's very clear from the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna says, is renouncing this attachment. It's not our effect. When we do an action, the results or the fruits, the param, as if we were in an agricultural occupation, sowing seeds and reaping the fruit. Let's say it's literally fruit, let's say grapes. Then we ourselves consume it. It doesn't belong to us. We cannot say it's my vineyard, these are my grapes, and nobody else can share in them. Or if I do share, it's not exactly sharing, I get paid. So a kind of commerce thing going on. And how should we interpret life? Should we interpret it exactly in the same commercial way? Vedanta says, no, that won't help you. Why? It's because that approach gives us a difficulty. It gives us fear. It gives us doubt. It gives us uncertainty. It doesn't get us out of a syndrome of pleasure and pain. So that syndrome is called samsara, and is what we call the waking life. And we seem to be caught up in it. Most people are caught up in it. A kind of spider's web, if you will. And it is comprising time and space, and it catches us. It catches our attention. And so all the senses respond to it. And when we say senses, we are really saying the mind. The mind is attracted to it. So naturally, if we don't do something about it, we end up in a very fearful, grieving kind of situation. We wind up with a net negative. So compulsion is really that aspect of that kind of behavior which is developed as a strategy, and we don't really see it. We don't understand it. It is tied in with a certain self-image which we project, but inevitably it is egoism. Egoism means I'm attached to the instruments to the body and the mind. The body is an instrument, the mind is an instrument. And clearly, the fact that I can observe what's going on in the body, the fact that I can observe what's going on in the mind, means I'm independent of it. So we have to assert our independence, our power of observation, and use the faculty of time. Time is almost like a passing train coming and going. And if we miss the first one, we can catch the second one. So it is the art of fishing, if you will, waiting for the next wave to come, the next wave within time and space, which is just at our disposal. And then putting a series of positive thoughts in like that. And because we think in words, it's useful to use words. And if you have a mantra, you can put that in, provided you have this meaning that goes along with the mantra. And other affirmative words you can use, various affirmations. Now, let us take as an example of being caught up in this fearful world. No greater example, I suppose, can we have than the example of Arjun. And the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is orientated around rescuing Arjun from his mode of fear, his mode of depression. And that's a kind of suffering. In Arjun's case, we see, and we are very clear from the first chapter, is desperate, even from the title, that we require some kind of comforting person. So naturally, we go to a counselor or a guide or a guru or something, and we ask for help. And so the first thing that any competent helping person can do is to help the sufferer get back to self-confidence. Because all of these compulsive observations, or these observations of compulsions, are really due to a kind of lack of self-confidence. It's full of internal conversations such as what if, and perhaps, and excuses, but, if, etc. This is the kind of language that we use in a constant conversation internally with ourselves. So self-confidence is the one thing that has to be put in. And the self-confidence says, you can do this. You have within you infinite possibilities. And what's the basis of that? So we find Krishna, he brings out a kind but very firm encouragement. And that encouragement will be suitable for all of us. So he says, in effect, he says, don't yield to weakness, to impotence. Now, impotence is a very telling kind of word. Impotence is to do with virility. And so it's a very appropriate word. Such a warrior, such a person who is supposed to stand up and do his job and fight, is a wonderful example. And he wants to put his weapons down. He wants to give up in the name of pacifism, which is kind of false. And we should not make the mistake that the text advocates war. No. But yes, in a kind of way, because in a way we're all at war with doubt and fear and temptation. In that way, we are struggling. So don't yield to weakness, because you won't deal with this by submitting to it, by yielding it, to allowing it to take center stage. Not only by one thought, but by subsequent other backup thoughts. And if we analyze our internal conversation, we will see that it goes something like an initial postulation, which is weak and negative, followed by a whole backup series, supporting arguments, if you will. And that naturally brings the mind down. It's not the solution. So instead of yielding to it, we have to exert a certain level of assertion. We have to assert something different. And that is what Krishna is advocating. So he says, don't yield to that. And then he reminds him of his reputation. You're a scorcher of all your enemies. You have a historical record about it. In other words, for all of us, we have had successes in the past that rely on our unique skills and talents. And all our successes has been because we had a strong desire for something. Then we were determined to get it. We were dedicated to get it. We got it. Well, why not do it constantly? So, where has this faint-heartedness all of a sudden, where has it come from? How does it all of a sudden arrives? You're a confident person, but this thing has knocked you. So how is it that you're able to change? How is it that you suddenly seem oppressed by a difficult condition? And this condition is unworthy. In fact, it's disgraceful. So instead of doing what we think we should do, empathizing deeply with the person, Krishna is reminding Arjuna, no, please stand up and remember your internal strength, which we all have, not just military people, but all of us have the capacity to observe obstacles and find a way around it and shift our attitudes and our interpretations of the world around us. So we can interpret the world as a series of difficult struggles, or we can interpret the world as a kind of gymnasium. Now that brings us to a question which is in text. We'll come to it shortly. Anyway, the message is like this: shake off this weakness, stand up. On what basis? And you see, Arjuna's pleading for help results in the Lord's kindly guidance, kindly smile. And he says, you see, the truth is, you are in a state of grieving. Grieving means that we are disappointed at the very least and deeply upset at the very most. Bereavement can be not just about the death of a person or the possible death of a person, but bereavement, the same stages, the same processes, comes with minor disappointments. For example, let's say rejection from somebody. Well, many people, most people, will have some kind of rejection in their lives. But for others, for some people, they take the knock and it puts them into a series of grieving processes. First of all, a disbelief. And then we have a blaming, and then we have anger, and then we have excuse, and then we have disappointment, and then all kinds of phrases we go through until we find our acceptance of it. So is it necessary? Is it a necessary process? Not really, because when you shift your perspective, you will see that we are grieving for, in the language that is being used in this dialogue, for those who should not be grieved for. And then the telling thing that is a generalized thing for everybody, the wise, those people who really have been able to shift their position and understand and interpret the world in a different way, they don't grieve. They don't grieve either for the living, for this particular situation, or for the dead. In other words, neither for the situation they encounter, nor any anticipated future situation. We can put that interpretation in as well. And so the Lord knows that confusion, like Arjun's, can't be removed without a clear perception of the immutable, glorious nature of the self within oneself and within others also. That is why we don't just deal with the compulsion, but we also deal with the observer of the compulsion and the assertion of having been able to change it, not by directly hitting it, not by smashing into it, but by taking advantage of the next second, 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 and filling it up, overflowing to a joy, with a joy. Now you might say, but what is there to be joyful about? And that means you didn't observe things properly. Because if you observe things properly, there would be a sense of amazement and wonder. Nothing would be ordinary or mundane. You would see a miracle in everything if you observed it correctly. But the fact is, we bypass what is there as an everyday situation until somebody points it out to us. Did you notice something? And then we take up a subject for meditation. But should we be meditating all the time and observing this and going through a process of appreciation all the time? No, we haven't really got the time for that. In meditation, we can do it. But when we are working, when we are walking, when we are living our life, the morning meditation is like a battery that gives us a foundation of appreciation so that we enjoy the sunshine, not because the sunshine is a rarity or not because the sunshine is a regular thing. In Zimbabwe, we don't talk about the weather, because we always have fine weather. Blue skies is not something that is a rare thing. It is every day we have it. And we don't appreciate it. Why? Because we see it every day. So when we learn to be more appreciative, appreciation requires us to put self-centeredness aside. And so this glorious nature, and to a person who habitually abides in this tremendous internal glory, then there are no opposites. There is no misfortune, nor is there any good fortune. Everything becomes glorious. And the world of the senses, the sense objects, is a field that is always changing, but in the end it perishes. So why should we invest so much of our emotions within it? But what pervades all of this, what keeps it going, what keeps it moving, that is the imperishable. It's the self, it's the ancient one, it's the eternal one, it's inexhaustible. And just as we can cast off old clothes or worn clothes or dirty clothes and put new ones on, well, the embodied self will shed worn out bodies, it will take on new ones, and so on. To understand this principle is the first step in developing, or regaining, I should say, our strength. Now we come to a question which somebody sent me. It says, what is it asks the question. First of all, let me just get the question up. It asks a question about Swami Vivekananda. He says, Swami Vivekananda, Swamiji, as he says, uses the word gymnasium multiple times in his lectures. He attaches two instances, and these I can read out. He says, can you please elaborate more on how we should understand his comparison of life with the gymnasium? This particular person also adds in brackets, this may be a number 5 question, and those who know the Enneagram will understand what that means. So here this text that he has sent. In a question and answer session such as this, the questioner asks, What is the Vedantic idea of civilization? That seems a curious question, which requires some kind of thought, but thoughtfully, Swami Vivekananda gives this reply. He says, you are philosophers. The questioner is undoubtedly a philosopher asking such a question. And you don't think that a bag of gold makes the difference between man and man? What is the value of all these machines and sciences? They have only one result. They spread knowledge. You have not solved the problem of want, but only made it keener. Machines do not solve the poverty question, for example. I'm putting in for example. They simply make men struggle the more. Competition gets keener. What value has nature in itself? Why do you go and build a monument to a man who sends electricity through a wire? Does not nature do that millions of times over? Is not everything already existing in nature? What is the value of your getting it? It's already there. Now that's a wonderful, wonderful series of statements. So the glory, which is driving everything, manifesting everything, is already here and it's glorious. But our attention is pitched somewhere else. And the somewhere else would be associated with these compulsions, this self-image. It would be associated with essentially this idea of a self-image, this idea of responding in such a way that we are putting ourselves in a certain position, like a kind of quadrant, and then reacting against the other half of it. So he adds this. The only value, he says, is that it makes this development. Don't forget, the question is to do with civilization. This universe is simply a gymnasium, there it is, in which the soul is taking exercise. Let's pause a little bit and see if we can deconstruct that a little bit. Let us see what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Is saying, in short, stand up and exert your strength. So weakness is equated with sin. Weakness is equated with ignorance. And ignorance is lack of knowledge. And if there were such a thing as an original sin, it would really be this weakness, this vulnerability. So what is the antidote? Strength. And where will we find it? We'll find it in diving deep inside, and we will get it in every sense. A person faced with an emergency situation who has to physically lift a car up miraculously finds the strength to do it. Desperate situations make for remarkable actions. There's the well-known case of a man whose hand got caught. He was climbing a mountain. And it was either he remains on the mountain and dies from cold, or maybe he gets swallowed by an avalanche, or he has to cut his hand off, and he decides he'll cut his, I think it was his whole arm off, if I'm not mistaken, and he does it. Now, what courage can be evoked in desperate situations? But can we bring it out in everyday situations all the time? We can if we consider that this whole of life is there to develop our strength, to give us muscular power. Exercise, an exercise machine. So we can take it as, not as a tragedy, not as a difficulty, but as a means for strengthening us. And the idea of a gymnasium is we are doing it not in a serious way, we are doing it in an off-duty moment. We're doing it as a leisure activity. So we're enjoying the strength that we're building up, the flexibility that we're building, the strength that we're building in a gymnasium. So this universe is simply, I love that word, simply. We shouldn't make it very complex. A gymnasium in which the soul is taking exercise. And after these exercises, what we become? We become gods. So the value of everything is to be decided by how far it is a manifestation of God. And in answer to the original question, civilization, he says, is the manifestation of that divinity in man. Now he also quotes from Inspired Talks. He says, let there be action without reaction. Action is pleasant. All misery is in our reaction. It's a wonderful, wonderful analysis of how we get into trouble. So I'll repeat, all misery is reaction. And what you're describing as observing a compulsion is actually a reaction. He says the child puts his hand in the flame, that is pleasure, but when its system reacts, then comes the pain of burning. When we can stop that reaction, then we have nothing to fear. Control the brain, do not let it read the record. Be the witness and do not react. Only thus can you be happy. The happiest moments we ever know, he says, are when we entirely forget ourselves. Work of your own free will, not from duty. We have no duty. Then he repeats this. The world is just a gymnasium in which we play. Our life is an eternal holiday. Now I'm glad he adds that, in which we play. It's a leisure activity. Our life is an eternal holiday. The whole secret of existence is to have no fear. You see, what happens is we segment our holiday. We say, oh, it's the summer season, we'll go on holiday. We'll book a place, go on holiday. But what he's saying is the whole of existence, the whole of life, our life, is an eternal holiday. But why is it we don't feel it like that? So you see, I often quote the behavior of the heart. The heart is a peristaltic pump, and you see how does it go on for so long, beating continuously at approximately 1 beat per second, is because it pumps and rests. It pumps and rests. It pumps and rests. And we have to learn the art of doing the activity and then finding the underlying pleasure in it, the rest. Pump and rest. So the whole secret, he says, of existence is to have no fear. Because after all, when you understand the real principles of the Vedanta, there is absolutely nothing to fear. There is no second to fear. There's only a oneness. And if we are dualists devoted to worship of God, we can put it in a beautiful, loving, and sweet way that the divine presence is always with us, protecting us in a motherly way. We are a child. There's that Desiderata in St. Paul's Cathedral, I believe. It tells us, see, you are a child of the universe. You have a right to be here. That kind of attitude. So the whole secret of existence, he says, is to have no fear. This is the great, great goal. We see in all the gestures, for example, in Buddhism, where this hand goes up, abhaya. I can assure you there's nothing to fear. Take refuge in me and all that fear is gone. So never fear what will become of you in the future. Depend on no one. Only the moment you reject all help and are free. The full sponge, he says as an example, can absorb no more. When we are full of the divine eternal ecstasy, if you will, the ecstatic joy that puts us in a good humor and gives us a sense of internal thrill and joy, a kind of internal sense of rapture, then all that fear is just displaced as sure as the rising of the sun dispels the darkness of the night. In this way, all that is removed. So this is the answer to that question. And then, I think that's it. That's on the question. Then if you come back to the original question that was posed, if I can get back to you here. it's not an easy thing, of course, to change habitual behavior. So first thing we have to do is really to be patient about it, about the cultivation of it. But we continuously have to remind ourselves that we have this internal strength available to us now. We don't have to go to a supermarket and get it. We don't have to order it from Amazon or something. So this being here and being with us, we can access it. And that means instead of pitching our attention in 100,000 different places, we can stabilize ourselves. And it's not that we prevent our reaction. You see, the whole purpose of giving somebody an exercise, please go and for a time being, a week, 2 weeks, observe the compulsion as it arises in the mind and gets translated in the hands and the arms and so on and so forth, and have a little fun with it. Don't be frustrated with it, because frustration will give you another negativity. So treat it as a kindly parent would treat, or a kindly uncle or aunt would treat a child. There you are. I see you're here again. Go and play nicely outside. We'll bring some more mature friends with us because we've outgrown you. So we learn to outgrow these behaviors. And then, of course, we do know a specific route, a specific way with a specific map and a compass, a kind of internal Google Maps that will tell us a certain direction. And if we go back to the Enneagram, and those who are tuning into the broadcast at a later date may be puzzled what that means, but suffice to say, we are all individuals. And because of that, there is an easy route that we can take, and there's a harder and harder route which we can take, no doubt. The very hard route overall is to go straight to the top of a mountain without going through the flora and fauna and the ups and downs and the possible avalanches that are there on a snowbound mountain. And a direct route will really be to self-abnegate, to say, I own nothing. Extreme renunciation. I am not the body, I'm not the mind. That we can do. That was a useful process some time ago in Vedic times. Even now today, there are some people who can do it. But for the vast majority of people, it will be to take an example. Because if this supreme principle that has no time, no space, is so difficult to connect with in reality, then we can at least take the example of a perfect entity who comes and visits us from time to time. And then we have a real understanding and can form a real human relationship with such an entity. And that is the beautiful system that we call Bhakti Yoga. And so then every activity, because we are obsessed with this, or should be, then every activity becomes a mindful, sacred, conscious movement, a kind of offering. Every movement of the fingers on a computer, every movement of a pen on a paper, every movement of the leg in walking, every movement of the arm in gesturing, every morsel of food that we take, we can learn that this is not ours, doesn't belong to us, and we can use it as a great, great offering of love to our divine lover who chooses to keep us invested with life, continues beating the drum of the heart, giving us a flow of pocket money for us to use in useful ways, so that wherever we go, we can be a smiling, cheerful, beaming lighthouse that warns people about the rocks and spreads its light everywhere without even a word being uttered. We have the capacity to do it. So That's the power, that's the importance of observing. But having observed it, we also observe the train of time that is going, or appears to be going, and taking advantage, catch the next train and the next train and the next train and the next train, and put something delightful, useful, and do it by inserting uplifting words. That is why I keep saying strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony. You can continue saying that, and then something resonates inside us. The whole molecular structure starts vibrating with this, and we feel an internal physical joy, and we feel an internal emotional joy as well. And we feel the contentment that knowledge brings. Now, of course, personally, because I'm in a few more advanced years, I suppose, but in my interesting, adventurous life, I have come across many situations which could have evoked fear in others, but somehow never invoked fear in me. And that is only because of a grounding I had in this Vedanta philosophy that says there's only oneness. And with that oneness, there's nothing to fear. There's not a sinister world against me. And it's not that I have to battle the odds. I can deal with it with a sense of humor. And when I fail to do that, then I become depressed and unhappy. I'm not immune from that, but that's something that we notice. And Swami Vivekananda there points out, we see that the greatest and happiest moments are moments when we are not really engaged, tied up with our own selves. So I hope I answered your question, and I hope I answered the question of the one that's in their text, who probably will see it on video now. Yeah. Well, maybe there's some other questions also.
Thank you so much.
You see, there is a direction that you know about, and it's not just that there is just a direction because a system says it's a direction. There is a common sense in that direction because you're filling in from your inner supermarket something that you need immediately. And that is the beginning of a journey, it's not the end of a journey. And so it is to systematically structure life in such a way that, to generalize it, that all the frustrations that you could be encountering are taken care of by following systematically a formula, even for a small time. Because you see, to really, really entrench a habit, it requires 10 days, and it's not my research, some researcher said this, 10 days with zero exceptions. Zero exceptions. Because sometimes when we make exceptions about something, then the exception becomes the rule. So 10 days, we have a better chance of forming a habit by doing a new thing, a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving, a new way of reacting for 10 days without exception. And then that becomes the foundation. It's not the end, it's the start. So we know what we have to do. The beauty about the Enneagram is that it spells out exactly for each person, this is your direction, this is what you need to do. And you can analyze that and break that down into specific steps, individual for you, that you can let go, as it were, without a sense of guilt or without a sense of strangeness. And just for the fun of it, go against the grain. Do something different. In any case, in order to develop a different reaction, a more positive reaction, a counter reaction, requires a certain degree of spirit of adventure, spirit of fun, and a kind of twinkle in your eye that says, just for the heck of it, I'm going to try something different. And I love Swami Vivekananda's analogy of life is simply a gymnasium, a kind of playground. In schools, probably, I don't know, certainly in my junior school, we had what we called a jungle gym, just a frame where everybody can climb and exercise themselves and so on, and stretch themselves out. But it's in a playground. And what's the side effect? It develops the physical person, but it also develops the mental person because it's a playground. We are having fun with it. So we have to develop the habit of fun within the context of what we're doing without changing the activities which we find. We have to reframe it in such a way that it becomes our gymnasium, where we gain strength more and more. And even things which seem painful and awkward and difficult, we can use as a strengthening mechanism. In a gymnasium, there may be a section in a gymnasium where people raise weights. And in the beginning, they find that they can't raise much. But then they realize that second, third, fourth, fifth time round, they can lift much more until ultimately they can lift with ease, at least the original weights that they were lifting. In the beginning, you may find swimming a little awkward, but with practice, you see the muscles have developed a little bit more with each swim. Same thing with cycling, same thing with running. Same thing with any other form of exercise. The more we do it, the easier it becomes. And we're gaining strength all the time. But you won't get it with one visit to the gym, even though you paid a year's subscription. That's the pattern. Many people pay a year's subscription to a gymnasium on New Year's Day, and the fee is upfront, and it starts off enthusiastically. And then one or two exceptions take place, and then 3 or 4 exceptions take place. By March or April, they're done with the gym. And that's a very typical pattern that takes place. So whatever you need to master takes time, takes commitment, and takes practice. And all done with a fun attitude. Otherwise, you'll be at the gymnasium on a running machine watching all the murder and politics on Sky News. Don't do it. There's a certain joy in strength, be it physical strength or mental strength. There's a certain joy in it, in itself. All right, well then we'll leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om